Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, All Nation Renovation, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg TRAURIG, LLP. Additional funding has been provided by grants from AVR Realty Company, LLC, Beechwood Organization, Briarwood Organization, Capital One Bank, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, the Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Stephen Napolitano, First American Title Insurance Company, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Genova, Burns & Giantomasi, Grubb & Ellis, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa & Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Markham LLP, Marcus Millichap Real Estate Investment Services, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, Massey KNAKAL Realty Services, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Moynihan Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides and Associates, Sterling and Sterling, Urban American, the WITKOFF Group.
You know, we're here in the fall of 2010, and, you know, people continue to love eating. People continue to run to restaurants in New York and around the country. But today I've assembled, or I should say my executive producer, Mr. Drew, assembled for me 4 of the leading operators, restaurant operators, managers, whatever you want to call them, to talk about what's happening in the restaurant business. My guest today is the legendary Alan Stillman, the founder of originally TGI Friday and the chairman of Fourth Wall Restaurants. We also have another legendary from Philadelphia, Phil Scotti, who is the head of the Clark's Group, CEO of the Clark's Restaurant, which is P.J. Clark. From Washington Heights, we brought in, a former pitcher over there. That's how he got into this business. Maybe that's how he got into the restaurant business. Phil Suarez of the Suarez Restaurant Group. And last but not least, my executive producer, the man who originally started in McDonald's on the Grill Room on 23rd Street, and he hasn't changed too much from there, Drew Naporent of the Myriad Restaurants. So since you brought together these 3 other individuals, what's going on today? All I heard prior to the show was I couldn't get a word in, but I have a cold, so it's good.
Well, we've assembled not only legendary people, but very, very smart people, very intelligent and good people, and their track record is excellent. So it should be a very good conversation that we're going to have here.
So what's going on, Big Shot?
What's going on in the city? I think things are pretty good. Today, of course, is the release of the Zagat survey, which tells us how we're doing, right? Or the Michelin Guide, which tells us to buy tires or something. Yeah, both in one day. And I think the state of the restaurant business in New York is really quite solid.
But, I think that brings up a good idea. How important is the Michelin Guide and the Zaggerts to the restaurant business in New York and around the country? You know, what do people look at? I mean, Alan, you've been in the business just a couple more years than him. You know, you started in the perfume business. You decided to be in advertising. You know, how do these publications have an effect on the business when people come to the restaurants?
Well, basically, there's New York City and the rest of the United States. So the effect of those 2 particular publications, and in general, the stars that come out in 25 different publications and are all over the blogs, are really New York tilted and New York organized. People that come to New York and people that live in New York pay a great deal of attention to those. But I don't think that Michelin, Zagat, I don't even know where the Michelin is in another city in the United States. I think Drew might know that.
I think they tried, but they've come back to New York City. I think they were in Las Vegas, and they might have been in Los Angeles, but they really are concentrating on New York.
Critical acclaim, so to speak, is quite evident in New York City, but it's not as evident in Philadelphia. So
but actually, in fairness to Michelin, they're actually going to release a guide from Chicago, because Chicago's a pretty good restaurant town. What I would say is this: Alan Stillman is fearless when it comes to advertising. He's taken out some of the greatest restaurant ads in the history of the industry.
And he didn't bring the knives today.
And
you know, when he was on CNBC, at least he brought the knives, you know?
Phil Scotti, I'm not sure if you or I, and Phil, I might include you in this, have ever spent actually any money on doing advertising the way Alan has. And the benefit of these two guides, the Michelin Guide and the Guide, is it's free advertising. I mean, that's the way I see it.
It is free advertising, but we talked about this before the show. I think it's, I think their importance is being diminished by the bloggers and the internet and the 1 million people out there that believe that they're now an authentic restaurant reviewer.
Well, you're right, Phil, because Open Table, which is actually also a useful tool,
absolutely,
you book reservations online, has a forum to blog in immediately.
You know, but I think Zagat and Michelin have got to be really conscious of the fact of how they place their books and where they play. That's their strength. If they do it right. For instance, Zagat, I believe, is in a heck of a lot of hotels across New York City and the country. In fact, I heard that it was right next to the Bible in a lot of hotels. The only two books in hotels. So it's a very important strategy.
But you know, you bring up the point, you talk about the bloggers and everything. There is a site called Travel Advisor, which I do believe is owned by Expedia, that people don't realize it. But people, when they are checking for a hotel around the country, they look for the comments from people. And that's really, and some of the hotel operators have said to me, that really has had an effect on them. People read this Travel and TripAdvisor more than anything else.
I think the savvy traveler, restaurant diner,
who goes
is going to check them all out. I think, but the good news for us is that if we're included, and obviously included in a positive way in these guides, you can't control the individual comments in Yelp or TripAdvisor. You just can't.
Well, I think the word savvy is a very big word, because I'm not really interested in what the savvy people think about those guys, because the savvy people are savvy. They're going to get it from their friends. They're travelers. They're world travelers. They know where to go. If they're going to Chicago for 3 days, they know what restaurants they want to go to. We run large restaurants. I am interested in the people that aren't so savvy.
Word of mouth and our industry is really, to me, the crucial component.
But how do you, you bring that up, word of mouth. You've been in business 40 years, 50 years. I mean, how do you keep the buzz in the restaurant business? How do you keep people coming back to your restaurant?
Great product. You got to keep on giving great product.
I mean, is it the chefs, is it the management, is it everything?
All of the above. It's the theater of what we do.
Simple questions. What restaurant do you go to today that you went to 5 years ago? Anybody can open up a restaurant and be hot for a year or two. But ask your friends, ask your guests, what restaurant do they go to today that they went to 5 years ago? I go to his restaurant, I go to his restaurant, and I go to his restaurant. All right? That's who I want to be. All right? You have to become, in some sense, a utility in your neighborhood. It's great about the guides, but in the end, it still becomes location, location, location.
A lot of times.
All right? You could have the greatest restaurant in the world if it's 100 miles away in the middle of New Jersey. I'm sorry, nobody's coming on a Tuesday night in February.
Or in Tribeca.
That's not.
I mean, no. I went to Cornell Hotel School where they taught location, location, location. But I scraped together some money in 1985. I opened Montrachet in the worst location, but hit a home run. And so my MO when I opened restaurants, I stayed in that neighborhood. Honestly, the trend moved to Meat District. Trend moved to the Lower East Side, and Midtown, which wasn't so sexy. When I finally, when we opened Nobu 57, I mean, we do over $20 million in volume there, which it would be inconceivable in any location in Tribeca. Inconceivable.
Yeah, look, I have
location. PJ Clark's is right opposite Lincoln
three
Center.
different parts of the city, and each market is
There's a different personality.
There's a different
The
personality.
one thing we should discuss, actually, Michael, is the generational aspect of dining out. When we were coming up, let's just say 20 years ago, and Alan was only 70 then, there was a certain customer. I think the customer has changed. In other words, that customer is still defined as what you said a moment ago, but the new generation, they don't seem to be gravitating to the fine dining aspects of what John George represents. Maybe Spice Market, which is another brand, obviously, Phil's. I don't know about in the steakhouse sector. Are they going to Smith & Wollensky? Do you get the 25, 35 demographic?
No, but we get some of them, but the bulk of our business at Quality Meats is 25 to 35
well, because
year olds.
you created a brand for them.
Right, you have to create, like you hit it right on the head, you have to create the brand for the 25, 35.
Yeah, but Phil's interesting because PJ's is like one of these places, like, you know, it's like your father took you to the place, or, you know, your friends and you drank
look,
there.
That's a good point. I mean, before Arnold and I took over PJ's, what the former owner didn't do, he forgot to introduce it to the next generation. All right? Big mistake. I think we all have to make some attempt to introduce it to the next generation. Yes, at 21, they don't, you know, they're not going to be so savvy, right? And perhaps they can't afford to go to certain places. But you have to try to get those people in some way.
Yeah, but you have to keep focused on what you've done and what has made you successful over the years.
And you have to keep focused on the customers who come back and
absolutely.
Again,
that's your gravy. Your core business, like you said before,
right,
is the key. And then
how about turns? How many times do you need? Because in a different, how many times do you have to turn a meal? How many tables do you have to turn in your restaurants?
It all depends. All about each restaurant is totally different.
What you rent and what you check out.
No, I agree,
That's
but
not an
I mean,
answerable question.
okay, but I mean, the real question that I really say, I think it's depending on the location and the type of food
and the price point.
And the price point. Your price point is what at PJ's?
Moderate.
Very modest.
I'm moderate to high.
You're moderate to high. Drew?
Well, it depends on the restaurant, but certainly even Nobu would probably be in a higher category, yet we do an enormous volume, and because of the style of what we do, we're not cooking anything, it's all raw, the service is fast and we tend to turn over quite well. The reality, though, is New York, more than any other city in the country, you can get the early seating, certainly in certain locations, pre-theater. You obviously get the second seating at 8 o'clock, and then if you're again in a good location,
you may be able to get the third seating.
But I think our goal, quite frankly, unless you're a quick turn restaurant, is just to get your two seatings with at least a healthy average check of over, you know, $50, $60, because then if you do the math, you know, anything north of $10,000 per night is probably break even for a lot of us.
Now here, you know, you were talking about Alan, who spent a lot of money on advertising. We spoke about Zagat's and we spoke about Michelin. How do you promote yourselves? How do you promote your restaurants in addition to these forms of advertising?
I think the collective...
I mean, I know the character that you are.
No, but the collective group here, I mean, we grew up in a time, maybe a little different again for Alan, but I don't think Phil, any of us would be afraid to get on the phone and speak directly to the journalists. Now when you speak to a journalist, they look at you and they say, well, have your girl call us. And you know, your PR person call. And I said, well, I'm that girl, because I haven't broken away from that mode. But PR now has taken over in such an insidious way. And some of these PR people...
In New York.
Well, the media takes the lead on promoting our restaurants.
But there's been an avalanche of new interest in food. And
what about the celebrity chefs, the cooking channel, Food Network?
Most of the celebrity chefs don't really have restaurants on them. I mean, his chef is a celebrity chef, but he works. I mean, he's not on TV. And
he's one of the few working.
He's very much so.
And he's as good as anybody.
Jonathan Waxman, my partner at Barbuto, was on Top Chef Masters. Business has been up 24% since he's been on that show. All right. Plus, he's selling some of his cookbooks, which he's very happy about. But as far as advertising, he's the only one whose advertising I ever respected. Generally, advertising for restaurants in New York has been considered, if you advertised, it was almost a sign that you were not doing well.
Right.
All right?
Which, if you look at it, really doesn't make very much sense. If you can advertise Tiffany's and you can advertise Mercedes, why shouldn't you be able to advertise
No, Alan, I
BJ's?
listen,
the
I
cost
remember.
factors, it doesn't make sense.
No, it makes no sense
Because what the
whatsoever.
media costs you to place ads
Hey,
is prohibitive.
I get in a taxi cab. I see Smith and Walensky.
Now,
and
we use our advertising to lead into public relation and marketing. And it's sort of a goal that we set each year to package the three of them together. And we do. I guess we would spend more money on advertising
Not only
than
is he
the
a
three of you
pioneer
put
in
together.
it, he's probably one of the few guys who do it.
And by the way, I'm complimenting. I mean,
No, I understand.
I remember that ad for French fries.
Yeah.
French fries, $24,
Right.
hamburger free.
You know,
I
a
love
couple
that.
of shows ago, Drew was talking about the foresight of the left racks when they moved into Nobu, moved into 57th Street. How are landlords today looking at you? Do they look at a celebrity chef or a good restaurateur or somebody of caliber like you, as opposed to who's
The
well
same as the
capital?
general public. They're all savvy New Yorkers. They know who's good, who's hot, who runs a good
But
business.
does that mean,
no,
does
my
that mean they're
question
cutting you a better deal?
That's
Not
what I'm
necessarily.
bringing up the dollar and
no,
cents.
But
They
I
will
think
cut you a
that
better
helps a
deal
heck of a
because you
lot.
are.
Knowing that if I walk in the door, or Alan walks in the door, my fellow guest, you're going to get a better deal because we're talking with a quality product.
Yeah.
They're negotiating with a quality product,
And they hope that
and
you're
they want
gonna be there.
longevity. Longevity to them is very important. They want somebody to be there for 15 years, and they want somebody not to hand over the key in a year or two, and go through that whole.
I wish I
debacle again.
shared Phil's optimism because I did a lot of this work very early on in my career, and now what I see is the work that I would be doing is going to celebrity chefs, and these things last maybe a year, like the Todd English stuff, or I don't want to besmirch anybody, but whoever's choosing these people, they're not doing their due diligence because there's a track record. We all have it. Luckily, and we all have our wins and losses, but when your losses start to outweigh your wins, why would you want that person to be a tenant in your building? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. So what I guess there is a great deal of sex appeal for somebody to attract a name as an anchor tenant in their building. But whether those people are like Lefrak or Trump, for instance, so smart to choose Phil instead of me, for instance. And Alan, weigh in on this. I mean, you just opened a new restaurant, so weigh in on the landlord situation.
Well, I think the landlord situation is definitely built upon what the landlord needs. In one particular location, he would like to have a John George restaurant, and in another location, he'd like to have a Jude Niebrand restaurant.
But do you really think
they're
they're that strategic? I don't think so.
No, I think there's
absolutely.
good
Good
landlords
guys?
and bad landlords.
Good guys,
it
definitely.
depends on the landlord.
Yeah,
Some,
but I also
some of them are not.
There are classic
retail-oriented.
restaurants in New York, which I'll name it when we go back to the green room. and those guys have been there like 30 years, 35 years, and they have nothing good to say. And that's it's a terrible thing if you think about it. That
They have nothing good to say about
About their
the
landlords, and they've been there 35
What's happening
years.
now in the market is a lot of the new developers or the new buildings are looking for celebrity chefs or real guys who do what we do because they want to sell those condominiums. That's a great drawing point to folks who pay $2,000 a square foot for an apartment, knowing there's a Drew restaurant downstairs, or a John George restaurant, or a Smith and Lewinsky's, or PJ Clark's. They want a
unfortunately,
product
the
in
bank-
that building. That helps. You can't imagine how much that helps in the selling of those apartments. And there was a really big movement until this little bit of a collapse we had in the last 2 or 3 years.
A small one.
Well, let's hope it gets back to where it was. But
Now, over the past year, you've opened up a couple of restaurants.
yes. Why? Who knows? To me, it's just something we felt that we wanted to do. We don't get intimidated by what's happening around us.
Well, yes, you didn't open up either one of those restaurants for 3 years. You opened them up because you're good enough to say they're going to be here 15 years.
We hope
and
so.
there's very few people, you can count them on two hands in New York City, the people that have the ability to raise the money and the ability to know that they'd be able to stay in that market for 15 or 18 years.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's why you did it. That's why my
That's why
son
you're
and I
doing
just
it. Yeah,
opened
we
up
feel
a new
we have a
restaurant.
great amount of confidence that we can offer a great product, and hopefully the people will come to.
What about the availability of capital from investors and the availability of capital from banks?
Well, banks don't even talk about it.
It's the same as any other.
That's fine.
No,
You use your own, or you get it from somebody else.
We're part of the whole country. It's the same with us as it is with small businesses. You know, people.
He got an SBA loan when he opened up Montrachet.
Yeah, that was under Ronald Reagan.
But you know, we're the
And
same.
by the way, I think
you know,
Barack Obama just
in
enacted
fact,
some
you know,
law
our
about
business
that.
is very risky. So, you know, it's not on the top of the charts for the banks.
If you deposit $10 million in, they'd be happy to lend you.
Happy to lend you $2 million.
I think you know. I was talking
Maybe
to Phil.
two.
I was talking to Phil before. He was going to invest in a Broadway musical with amazing
No, I
aspirations.
said they asked me to invest.
Well, they asked me to invest in Spider-Man also,
Right.
and I looked at the Spider-Man thing, and when it grew to $50 million, and it was out of my bailiwick, I went to somebody who is a producer of Broadway shows and asked their opinion. Of course, got the right answer. But an investment in the restaurant business, it depends on the track record, but it also depends on how much money is going to be spent and what the return is supposed to look like. And I never ask for a lot of money from individuals because I'd rather take small amounts of money because in the event that it's not profitable, you know, you just don't want to feel beholden to the loss.
Yeah, but would any of us go into a space now, a raw space, and build from zero, all of our own money?
I did.
Alan did, yeah.
75% I did.
So that's not zero.
No, definitely not zero. But we spent a great deal of money, tremendous
it's
amount
totally
of money.
different now.
But today you would do that or
We
not?
did it at the Hurricane Club. Come down, take a look.
That's true.
An absolute
What do we all
fortune.
feel? What's restaurants per square foot now built out in
From
New York?
scratch?
350?
Oh, no, I don't
More
think
than
you
that.
can
More
go
than
to
that.
You think
350. I would say
450?
450.
450.
450, 500.
450.
Well,
non-union.
it depends on who's doing the work also.
Yes, not the finishing,
Yeah, yeah.
because that doesn't cost
Yeah,
very
yeah.
much, whether you put in...
You got to be awfully smart in today's market. And you
Yeah.
can make deals now because there are guys who
There are
really wanna
contractors,
work.
right, the construction build.
You know, you can make very good deals. So I think you can get that number down. But it's still...
You know, we were talking, you know, we talk about Manhattan. What about the rest of the world? You know, there are 4 other boroughs.
Oh, there is.
No.
Well, talk about Brooklyn, you know, I mean...
But Brooklyn, we were talking about.
Yeah.
The restaurants in Brooklyn are not really the size or the, you know, they're really the chef.
Here's the way it works.
Operating.
Here's the way it works.
Maybe
Before there was Brooklyn, there was Tribeca, or there was other outlying neighborhoods that were low rent. Restaurateurs who can only afford a certain amount of rent, like I was when I was 29, I opened in Tribeca. So the same phenomena in Brooklyn where the rents were low. Guess what happens? The minute you have a success, then the guy across the street says, wait a minute, you know, I'm across from Montrachet and I'm going to charge this for the rent. Or so the rents start, you know, look at the Lower East Side. There was nobody over there when we were kids growing up. Now it's a mecca of restaurants. They're all paying stupid rents over there. And that's what's happened in Brooklyn. You know, Brooklyn needed good restaurants. A few opened. They were probably dirt cheap in the rent, and now everything's ridiculous. Williamsburg.
Yeah, but you don't look at, they're not, most of the layouts in Brooklyn are pretty small. I mean, you know, it's pretty hard to get a...
You mean
usually, in size, you know, usually...
Even if you could get it,
Yeah.
to open up a $200-person, $50 restaurant, that's a lot of people to fill up a restaurant.
You don't have
so
the
you
market.
really
You don't have the
wouldn't do
market.
it.
I mean, for
a lot of them
example,
are 40, 50
I'll give you an
seaters.
example.
Right, exactly.
A lot of them are 40,
Morton's
50.
opened up in downtown Brooklyn.
Okay.
There's no lunch crowd.
Right.
You know, it's really a difficult type of situation. Downtown Brooklyn wasn't prepared for a Morton's. You know, what's going to probably open up next to Morton's is a PJ
Well, the guy who picked
Chang,
that spot is probably not
or
working
or I hear maybe a Dallas barbecue, because that's more appropriate for
course.
downtown Brooklyn on this
But
situation.
I think we talked a little bit about it before, but it's all about these wonderful young chefs and these wonderful couples who are opening in Brooklyn and really loving and enjoying their craft. And
Which is very special and very
Which is
wonderful
wonderful.
to see, but that doesn't make it a business.
no.
It's really...
No, it's a lifestyle. You know?
It's a lifestyle.
but it's a good start.
And I'd say
it's great.
90%.
Well, you got to start someplace, right?
90%
Yeah,
of the
well, it's great.
restaurants over there are based upon 2 people, husband and wife, 2 guys that know each other, each one not taking a salary at the end of the year. If they take $182,000, they're happy. That's not really a business, because any one of us would have to pay 2 people $200,000 to run it.
It's a great experience to go to
so
one
we'd
of
be
those
even.
really nice restaurants there. You really feel
There's
like
a
you're in
new
somebody's living room.
19-seat
Definitely.
It's really
Montreal Jewish-style deli, I hear, that's got written great reviews.
If you have to import Montreal meat into the deli capital of the world, we're in trouble.
There it is.
When you're serving 50 covers a night as opposed to 700 or 600 or 5, you can really get down to business.
All of us love to go to Brooklyn and have a nice little meal at night at one of the new places. It's kind of fun.
It's great.
As a business, they have the same problem as the Upper East, Upper West Side, where night business but not day. They need.
I mean, you had the Upper West Side. I mean, you had docks over there.
No longer.
No, that's right. You have that. I mean, there are certain neighborhoods, there are certain markets that can survive in different periods of time.
But I think Phil said it a moment ago, too. The proof's in the pudding. If the product's good, the restaurant's going to hang out. That's why P.J. Clark's is a perennial.
But you also need the traffic, and you need the landlords aren't giving us time off for lunch. Right?
Yeah. By the way, Mike, that's true. The landlords aren't. Nobody's cutting anybody a break. They might want us, but that doesn't mean we're getting, super deals. We're getting okay deals.
Why don't you go to Harlem today? You were down in Tribeca. You can go to Harlem. He can show you what Washington Heights was,
The Michigas,
a lot of new restaurants
in 1997, when we were going to do a restaurant in the Old Men's Playhouse, the Michigas I got from the Harlem Chamber of Commerce and all the powers that be there, including Al Sharpton, by the way. I had to have lunch with Al Sharpton to get permission, So
yeah, but also the price points.
And they still don't have a good restaurant.
The price points in those areas, unfortunately, the demographics.
But have you been up to like Inwood recently? There are certain new restaurants up there.
Yeah, but again, it's almost like going to restaurants in the Bronx. They're only
trip to the country.
Yeah, it's price points, and
totally.
You can't get
Dinosaur
more than 20,
barbecue, though.
You can't get more than $25 a person, even at night. And it's tough. The economics of running a restaurant at those numbers and trying to put out a great quality product are pretty difficult, if not impossible.
I think you almost have to split the restaurant business into two sizes and say, here's a restaurant that I think I can do $7, $8, $9 million and leave that to the professionals. Here's a restaurant that I can make money at and do $3 million. So size and the amount per person is a huge, huge definition.
Agreed.
So what I think is, since I have the professionals will flourish and will continue to open and successful new restaurants, and we'll get Michelin stars, as you said, and Zagat's ratings. And I'd like to thank the stars for being here today. Alan Stillman, Phil Scotti, Phil Suarez, and Drew Naporent. See you next week.
Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, All Nation Renovation, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, GREENBERG TRAURIG, LLP. Additional funding has been provided by grants from AVR Realty Company, LLC, Beechwood Organization, BRIARWOOD Organization, Capital One Bank, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, the Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Stephen Napolitano, First American Title Insurance Company, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Genova, Burns & Gian Tomasi, Grubb & Ellis, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa & Associates, Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Markham LLP, Marcus Millichap Real Estate Investment Services, Margolin Weiner & Evans LLP, MASSEY KNAKAL Realty Services, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Moynihan Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides & Associates, Sterling & Sterling, Urban American, the WITKOFF Group.